What makes the so-called Negro unable to stand on his own 2 feet? He has no self-confidence. He has no proud confidence in his own race. Because the white man destroyed your and my past, destroyed our knowledge of our culture. And by having destroyed it, now we don't know we have any achievements, any accomplishments. And as long as you can be convinced that you never did anything, you can never do anything.
This came about as a result of statements in the press indicating or trying to imply that he had rejoiced over the assassination of President John Kennedy. A statement that Brother Malcolm had said at the time was that it was a case of the chickens coming home to roost. He had been saying all along that the violence, that whole violent atmosphere that had been created as a result of the movement, and by the government not doing anything about this, and in this case Kennedy was the president at the time, they had created a whole atmosphere of violence, and finally this violence had reached the White House.
The Nation of Islam, as it is guided spiritually by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, doesn't involve itself in politics in any form because of its failure to become actively involved in the struggle of the Negroes overall. Many persons in the past have drifted away from it and are now becoming involved with us in an active effort to work with other groups toward solving the political, social, and economic evils that afflict our people.
Malcolm X made 2 trips to Africa, including a pilgrimage to Mecca to become an Orthodox Muslim. His meetings with African leaders to seek their support attracted the attention of the U.S. Justice and State Departments.
Well, my purpose here is to remind the African heads of state that there are 22 million of us in America who are also of African descent, and to remind them also that we are the victims of America's colonialism or American imperialism, and that our problem is not an American problem, it's a human problem. It's not a Negro problem, it's a problem of humanity. It's not a problem of civil rights, but a problem of human rights.
Which means that the black man should control the politics of his own community and control the politicians who are in his own community. My personal economic philosophy is also black nationalism, which means that the black man should have a hand in controlling the economy of the so-called Negro community. He should be developing the type of knowledge that will enable him to own and operate the businesses and thereby be able to create employment for his own people, for his own kind.
Malcolm, are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Please. I think you're right in my chairman. The audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was during my traveling, that nations African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal and Angola, and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly. Certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results. And I live in a society whose social system is based upon the castration of the black man, whose political system is based on castration of the black man, and whose economy is based upon the castration of the black man. He came up with what they call a civil rights bill in 1964, supposedly to solve our problem, and after the bill was signed, 3 civil rights workers were murdered in cold blood. Civil rights bill down the drain. No matter how many bills pass, black people in that country, where I'm from, still our lives are not worth 2 cents. Well, anytime you live in a society supposedly based upon law, and it doesn't enforce its own law because the color of a man's skin happens to be wrong, then I say those people are justified to resort to any means necessary to bring about justice where the government can't give them justice.
The closer they looked to Malcolm X, the quicker they got hooked on Malcolm X.
Early in 1965, SNCC and Dr. Martin Luther King joined forces for a voting rights campaign in Selma, Alabama. When SNCC invited Malcolm X to speak in Selma, he reaffirmed his willingness to support other civil rights leaders.
And I think that the people in this part of the world would do well
what he's asking for and give it to him fast before some other factions come along and try to do it another way. What he's asking for is right. That's the ballot. And if he can't get it the way he's trying to get it, then it's going to be got one way or the other.
In 1965, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee launched new strategies to challenge white control of Southern politics.
Our direction was clear. A heavy emphasis on nationalism. Strong, as strong as Malcolm had it, as strong as we could get it.
Carmichael and other SNCC members began a voter drive in Lowndes County, Alabama, known as Bloody Lowndes for its violence against blacks. Although 80% of the population was black, there were no black elected officials. Economically dependent on white plantation owners, many were afraid to join civil rights efforts, and none had been allowed to register to vote until early 1965.
Now in this country it says majority rules. We are 80% of the majority in this, we are 80% in this county, and we have the right to rule this county. We have the right to rule this county, and we're going to rule it. I don't care how poor we are and how black we are, we're going to govern this county.
Stokely Carmichael and Colton Cox and others who got together and told us, according to the Alabama law, if we didn't like what the Democratic Party was doing in our county or the Republican Party, we could form our own political organization, and it could become a political party.
George Wallace was then the head of the Alabama Democratic Party. The Alabama Democratic Party was racist. Its symbol at that time had a white rooster, and it had the words of white supremacy. That was the official emblem of the Democratic Party of Alabama. So here it would be easy for us to tell our people, hey, look, this party is not for us. We need our own party.
The new political party was named the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, but it became better known by the symbol it chose, a Black Panther.
And then when we chose that symbol as a Black Panther, then many of the people in our county started saying we were violent during that time. You know, now you got a violent group in Lowndes County who is turning out who's going to start killing white folks. But it wasn't that. It was a political, just a symbol to our organization that we was here to stay and we were going to do whatever needed to be done to survive.
Everybody was excited because they said, well, they have the rooster, which represents the Democratic Party, the elephant, which represents the Republican Party. Why can't we have a black cat to represent us? Everybody knows how a cat looks, and we were excited because we knew that if a person couldn't read and write, they sure knew the difference between a cat, an elephant, and a rooster.
This is why the white man, his little children, he tells them about George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, all these white heroes. But we are never taught about any black hero. Only someone we're shown in history is my grandfather was picking cotton.
Picking cotton from the break of dawning till the day I'm through. Oh, Lord, that sun's baking, wearing me out with all the work I do. Down, the tide goes down, the doctor gather round and they all begin to shout. Hey, hey, Uncle Dudley, he says the doctor beats the beat, says the doctor beats the beat on the Mississippi mud.
Cotton picking don't move me, no. But when it comes to teaching the black people something about great black men who stood their ground, who were scientists, who were civilizers, who were fathers of culture and civilization, the white man has shrewdly written that role out of the textbook.
SNCC went door to door and farm to farm, explaining to first-time voters the rules for taking part in the Lowndes County primary.
Now, the law says that you can't vote in ours and also vote in the Democratic primary, which has to be held on the same day according to the law. So that what we'll have to do is vote on one and not the other. So if you want to vote for our candidates for sheriff, for tax assessor, tax collector, coroner, and the school board, then you have to vote for us.
On May 3rd, 1966, Lowndes County blacks voted for the first time since the end of Reconstruction. some voted as Democrats in the Hayneville courthouse. Several blocks away, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization held its primary on the grounds of the First Baptist Church. Voters for the Independent Party were introduced to candidates for 7 offices, including sheriff, before casting their ballots. Even with the ever-present threat of violence, 900 black voters showed up that day to vote for the Panther.
This was the first time that the black people in this county had came together to make choice of their own candidates for public office. It was important also because of the numbers of people that turned out to that election on that day and voted for their candidates and felt that they had done something for themselves to start making changes, the kind of changes they wanted to see happen in the system.
11 days later, Stokely Carmichael, representing the new militancy within SNCC, defeated John Lewis as national chairman.
If you took a clear look at John Lewis, he looked more like a young Martin Luther King Jr. than anything else.
It was almost like a coup. People were saying that we need someone who would stand up to Lyndon Johnson. We need someone who would stand up to Martin Luther King Jr.
It was clear that he'd been alienated from the SNCC staff. So the vote against him represented that. But more importantly, it represented the clear insight of the SNCC organizers that understood that the question of morality, upon which King's organization depended to bring about changes in the community, were not possible. The SNCC people had seen raw terror, and they understood properly that this raw terror had nothing to do with morality, but had to do clearly with power.